Today I'm reviewing Blades of Vengeance, a fantasy-themed side-scrolling action platformer for the Sega Genesis. It was developed by Australian studio Beam Software and published by EA Games in 1993. The basic story, and it's very basic, takes place in a fantasy realm known simply as the Kingdom. An evil female entity known as Mannix, the Dark Lady, has conquered the kingdom with an army of monsters. But not all hope is lost. A presumably benevolent male deity, called the Master, is keen on taking it back. To do this, he calls on 3 champions, the only warriors left in the kingdom with the power to oppose Mannix. These are our 3 playable characters, and like the storyline, they're pretty generic. We have a voluptuous, scantily clad Amazonian known simply as the Huntress. We have a Conan impersonator known simply as the Barbarian. And we have an old Gandalf wannabe wizard guy known simply as the Wizard. If any of these characters have actual names, we never learn them. The Master just refers to them as my servants. So I've taken the liberty of naming them myself. This is Haughty McAsskickums. This is Beefcake the Barbarian. And this is... the Wizard. In addition to being fantasy archetypes, our 3 heroes are also gameplay archetypes. Haughty is our quick, agile, high-jumping, but kind of weak character. Beefcake is our bruiser, slow and plodding, but great for dishing out heavy damage. And the Wizard is our slow and physically weak, but kills enemies at a distance long-range specialist. All 3 have their strengths and weaknesses. And to the credit of the developers, they feel different when you play them. Haughty feels very light on her feet and nimble. She was obviously intended to be eye candy, but I think one of the hottest things about her is how she moves, the graceful deer-like way she leaps and bounds through open levels. Beefcake feels slow and heavy, but powerful, like each swing of his weapon really is slamming and chopping into his enemies. And the Wizard feels like a cranky old man.
Oh, this used to be such a nice kingdom before the monsters. Goddamn imps! Go home, you punks! I remember when there wasn't an imp within 300 miles of the castle proper. Oh, medicine.
So you pick your hero, then you strut, jump, climb, and fight your way through the kingdom to the temple where Mannix resides. The game only has 8 levels, but they're quite long. Each one is broken into several stages, any of which could really stand as a level on its own. Besides the many enemies you encounter, each stage has several secret areas, usually with treasure chests full of silver and other useful items. Since there's no time limit, it's a good idea to find as much loot as you can. You're gonna need it later in the game. At the end of each level, you fight a boss. Most of these are pretty cool and very satisfying to take down. After you kill the boss, the Master appears in an undulating vision to warn you about the next level. Then it's time to go shopping. Silver can be spent between levels on health and invisibility potions and other power-ups and spells. Your funds are pretty limited, so deciding which items to buy can be difficult. Some of it will come down to which character you choose and your style of play. But one item that every player should pick up as soon as possible is the armor. In addition to permanently decreasing the damage you take, the armor increases your offensive power, endows your character with a special attack, and makes them look decidedly more badass. Haughty gets a crossbow and looks stone-cold lethal, though admittedly still not very well protected. Beefcake gets a mace and goes from a loincloth to a suit of plated mail. And the Wizard suddenly looks like an actual wizard, instead of a deranged old panhandler. So you make your way through the kingdom, chopping through Mannix's army of monsters. At the end of level 8, you confront the Dark Lady herself, who it turns out isn't a lady so much as a 2-headed dragon hydra thing. Take Mannix down and you beat the game. The graphics in this game rule. The sprites are detailed and well animated, the backgrounds are vibrant and full of cool little touches and special effects that help set the mood. A few levels do share tile sets, but they look so good you'll hardly mind. The whole game feels like a piece of fantasy art. If you like Dungeons & Dragons or Magic the Gathering or anything of that sort, you'll probably dig the visuals here. The sound design is good. I won't say any of the music is brilliant, but it's good. It even holds up well to repeated listenings, which is fortunate since some levels can take upwards of 15 minutes. The sound effects are cool too. I freaking love the explosion you get when enemies die. There's such a cool finality about that, and it's twice as satisfying when you take down a monster that's been grieving you. Boom! Yeah? Who's laughing now? You blown-up bastard. The controls are solid. There are some awkward moments when they work against you. The jumping in particular can feel a little wonky, but for the most part they function quite well. This is even more impressive considering how differently the three characters handle. I've played plenty of games where the developers couldn't make even one character control well. And finally, we have the game itself. As much as I like the art and music and other assets in Blades of Vengeance, what really sets it apart for me is the gameplay. At first blush, this looks and feels like a hack-and-slash game. The natural inclination is to charge ahead at full speed, slashing away gleefully at every enemy you encounter. But you won't last long doing that. Blades of Vengeance requires a more thoughtful, methodical approach. Combat consists largely of blocking enemy attacks, then seizing the right moment to counterattack. And while that may sound simple, it can get tricky. Your timing has to be exact. If you miss your mark or get impatient, you'll pay for it. Things get even more harrowing when you're confronted with multiple enemies. Monsters can materialize out of thin air, and what appeared to be an empty room can suddenly be swarming with bad guys. Besides the enemies, booby traps and environmental hazards abound. Long falls can hurt you. Even treasure chests can't always be trusted. Every step you take is fraught with danger. This makes for very tense and sometimes frustrating gameplay, but the satisfaction of figuring out how to defeat an enemy or avoid a trap or access a hidden area is very rewarding. The game has its own unique rhythm and logic, and once you get in sync with it, you'll find yourself cutting down monsters and raking in the loot. When you're succeeding, Blades of Vengeance is a huge rush. And when you're not, it will piss you right off. The game tries your patience with cheap hits. As I mentioned, there are booby traps and hazards and hidden enemies everywhere. Sometimes environmental clues warn you of these dangers, but often as not, you just have to take your lumps and try a different approach the next time. Same story with the bosses. Same story with the whole freaking game. Trial and error, baby. Another complaint is that Blades of Vengeance has no save feature or passwords. It's not a super difficult game, but it's a little long to play through in a single sitting, especially considering how intense it is. And being made to play the same old levels over and over, just so you can have another go at the new ones, gets tedious. To offset this, the game lets you buy extra lives. And you earn a continue for every 75,000 points you score. But the extra lives are expensive, and continuing almost doesn't seem worth it, because when you run out of lives, you lose a lot of your special items and power-ups. These are so important in the later levels that you're almost better off just starting from scratch. Finally, there's the two-player co-op mode. Some games are twice as fun to tackle with a buddy. This isn't one of them. Rather than having a split screen, the two players have to share. To try and keep them in the same vicinity, the game puts an invisible box around them. If just one player tries to wander off, they'll hit a wall. Both players have to be moving in the same direction for the screen to scroll with them. If one player does manage to wander or fall too far off screen, their controls are locked until the other player catches up. The camera sometimes struggles trying to decide who to track, and when one player hits start, the game pauses just for that player, meaning if you're in a cheating mood, you can actually avoid taking damage this way. There are a lot of little gameplay quirks that crop up, making it obvious this mode was tacked on at the last minute. I won't call it an absolute disaster, but it does a disservice to the game. For the best possible gameplay experience, go solo on this one. Researching this game online, the most common complaint I encountered is that it's too hard. I have to disagree with that. I don't think it's a super difficult game, but it is an exacting one. It demands forethought and precision and patience, and if you get sloppy or reckless, it punishes you. I will admit it can be cheap. Hell, it's infuriating at times, but the satisfaction that comes from beating it helps make up for that. Or at least, it did for me. I feel a bit conflicted on how to rate this because some of the things I love about it could be called flaws. It's frustrating, it's maddening, it's unfair, but those same qualities also make it engaging and exciting and rewarding. The many, many times it pissed me off actually made my victories that much sweeter. Or, to paraphrase Dolly Parton, the way I see it, if you want to experience the super satisfying moments of triumph in Blades of Vengeance, you have to put up with the cheap, aggravating trial-and-error bullshit. Cheapness aside, it's a fun, pulpy celebration of the fantasy genre. You set out on a seemingly impossible quest. You explore forbidding yet beautiful landscapes. You confront ancient evils and tap into powerful magic and discover long-hidden treasures. You creep through dank and devious dungeons and ascend ragged cliffs and traverse haunted forests. And if you're patient and persistent, you stand triumphant over your fallen enemies and revel in your victory. Blades of Vengeance has its flaws, but it's also a lot of fun. It isn't quite a great game, but it's a good one. I'm giving it 3 thumbs up out of 5. I'm also awarding it the official Death Got Fat seal of veracity in advertising, or Adgapasva for short. This prestigious honor is bestowed upon retro titles whose box art actually reflects what you see in the game. There's Hottie, there's Beefcake, and there's the Wizard. They're even dressed as they should be. Congratulations, Blades of Vengeance.